Welcome to Season 4 of E-commerce Fastlane. This podcast helps resilient entrepreneurs thrive with Shopify. And now, on to episode 188.
You're listening to E-commerce Fastlane, the podcast show to help you build, manage, grow, and scale a successful and thriving company, powered by Shopify. Listen to real conversations with partners and subject matter experts as they share proven practical strategies, platforms, and the best Shopify apps to help you accelerate your business. The time is now for you to improve efficiencies, grow revenue, profit, and lifetime customer loyalty. Please welcome your host, startup founder and strategic advisor, Steve Hutt.
Now, this episode is brought to you by Attentive. Now, how do most innovative companies reach consumers? Well, meet Attentive, the text message solution trusted by innovative retailers and e-commerce brands like CB2, Coach, and thousands of Shopify brands. Now, on average, Attentive customers see a 25x ROI and an 18.5% of their online revenue is driven by SMS, so it's very compelling. You can grow your SMS list fast and engage with high-value mobile subscribers with personalized messages that exceed your performance marketing goals. Now, getting started is super easy. Attentive's best-in-class SMS marketing experts will help you quickly launch and scale your SMS program. Now, are you ready for SMS to become one of your top 3 revenue channels? You can learn more how to get started with your free trial by requesting a demo at attentivemobile.com. Well, hey there, it's Steve, and welcome back to the E-commerce Fastlane podcast. Now, if this is your first time listening, this is an e-commerce show where we have honest and transparent conversations about building and thriving with your store powered by Shopify or Shopify Plus. If you're an ambitious lifelong learner, which you probably are since you're here today, we're excited you're here, definitely in the right place. I have new episodes. They come out twice weekly with all the podcast players like Apple Podcast, Stitcher, Google Play. We're on Spotify now, many, many more. Wherever you listen to your podcasts, I'm sure you can find E-commerce Fastlane. You can also stream current episodes, including a very relevant back catalog directly from E-commerce Fastlane. I think we're up to 190 some episodes now, and there's a lot of great partners in the Shopify ecosystem and the problems they're solving for a lot of Shopify brands. There's some offers, to take a look at some of these solutions and some of these agency partners. So it's pretty exciting. So check out ecommercefastlane.com. Now, in today's episode, I'm really excited to have John Chow on. He's the co-founder of a company called Segments. I think the original company is Trestle, but their solution is called Segments. And what they are is a Shopify app, and they help store owners and marketing teams really to scale their revenue. And what they do that is by leveraging targeted customer segmentation and kind of advanced data analytics. It's all presented and very actionable inside a very easy to understand kind of visual manner. There's nothing worse than having all this data and just not knowing what to do with it. And so that's the difference with Segments. And I recommend it to a lot of the brands that I manage. I have many, many, many customers that love Segments. So I wanted to make sure that I got John on the show today to just share his solution a little bit wider to a wider audience. And then also just learn some of the things that are happening with this Q4 and this kind of inevitable rush that's happening with BFCM, and potentially some things that are happening with Apple's iOS update, and lots of craziness going on right now. But there is a solution to your data problems, and then how you can create better conversions, better lifetime value. And so, John, welcome to E-commerce Fastlane.
Thanks, Steve. Super happy to be here.
I know, and believe it or not, you're the first guest that I've actually had on 3 times.
Oh, wow. That's such an honor. 3 times. Third time's the charm.
Exactly. But the thing was, your platform keeps iterating. And I think, and our time zones are like completely opposite. I think it's 1 o'clock in the morning for you. It's 10 a.m. for me. I just wanted to publicly thank you, number one, for staying up super late here. It's, here it is late Friday night, Saturday morning for you. And it's early Friday morning for me. But you know what? Where there's talent and where there's some education, I wanted to make sure that we share it best we can. I just wanted to thank you so much for making this work today.
Of course. I love it. Love to be on.
So Segments, there's going to be people listening today that maybe don't know the solution, or they need to be reinvigorated about what exactly the platform does and why you've built it, and the impact that you're making with Shopify store owners. So maybe just talk a little bit on a high level first about the platform itself, and just kind of a little bit of an iteration, like where has it been, and then what sort of things is it solving today, maybe versus the last time we spoke.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think more and more what we realize is that we need to make this platform ever more interactive and self-guided, right? So I think we started with awesome analytics and segmentation, but I think what our customers are coming to us for now, like they want more answers, right? It's like, well, I want to know how to create meaningful segmentations for my store. I want to know metrics like customer lifetime value. I want to be able to filter based on the different customer segments that I have. And then I want you to tell me what to do with it, right? Like that's the biggest concern, is like they really don't know what to do, or like what segments to create sometimes. And so being ever more prescriptive with our insights, and then also being more integrated with our different marketing partners is going to be the key, right? Like we've added, since last time we talked, we actually added more integrations like Facebook, Google, OmniSend, right? I think we plan on doing SMS integrations as well. I can't say which one yet, but I think, in about a month, we will have an SMS integration. And so it is becoming so important, right? Like to be able to take your insights and your segmentations to all of the channels that you do your marketing in.
Right. And that's the one thing that I love about segments, is that, it's a very unique approach to looking at your first party data. So this is the data that's inside Shopify. This is not going out externally. This is actually looking at your sales data and just how you're able to associate, and I think we'll get into it in a few minutes, this RFM, this recency, frequency, monetization kind of concept, but you expand it even further. So it's really, really interesting that we look at the data inside Shopify, and then from there can make some actionable insights about, well, what are my current customers that are active? What are my at-risk customers? And what are my churned customers? And then how do I interact with, no purchases, 1, 2, or loyal customers that are maybe 3 or more purchases? I think there has to be a way of communicating with those different kind of cohorts or segments of customers. And that's what your tool does kind of on a surface. But I know there's way more to it with product associations and stuff like that. If people are more inclined, if they're looking at one product, in the likelihood, they're probably looking to buy this product too, because others have done that. And just having that intelligence and the statistical relevance to want to recommend the other product, it's so interesting that's what your tool is really aiming to solve.
That's exactly it. Yeah, Steve. I mean, you nailed it on the head. Because when we looked at this problem, right, we were just like, okay, well, how can we help our marketers, help our brands move customers down the funnel and getting to that second purchase, right? Like the magical moment for a lot of e-commerce brands making profit is on the second or the third purchase, because usually the first purchase people make, you're either breaking even or making a small loss because of customer acquisition costs and whatnot, right? So it's getting that second purchase, getting to a much more affordable way to market to them, which is using email and other tools of remarketing that is usually way more affordable. And I end up spending a lot of time just talking about the lifecycle segmentation, like you were just talking about. And so just for people who have not seen this is basically a 4x3 grid of 12 segments going across from people who have no purchase to one-timers, to repeats, to loyal customers with 3 or more purchases. And then to the right, you have lifecycle stages going from active to at-risk to churned. And all this data is calculated based on what your customers are doing in your store, right? It's not just some statistical assumptions. It is actually what's happening in your store. And we use that to talk to our brands around how to segment, and then using those to plug and play into their email platforms or Facebook and Google to have an omni-channel target experience.
Yeah, love it. So let's share a little bit about your journey, because I think it's kind of important to understand a little bit about your background and why you're kind of uniquely positioned to want to build this. Because I think a lot of times it's not about, hey, I just want to have a SaaS company with recurring revenue. I mean, yes, it's a business, like I get it. But on the flip side, though, it's like, yes, this is a business. But on the flip side, though, I have a storied kind of background leading up in the education and the execution. So maybe you can share that kind of journey leading up to kind of where we are today.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So I mean, I love data, right? I have a math and statistics background. I spent 15 years in data science, building machine learning models for retail marketing teams in San Francisco, the Bay Area. And why we started was this: we realized that when we were at LinkedIn, me and my co-founder Tony, we were asked to do this what we call list polls, right? Every time we wanted to run a campaign, the marketers come to us and we perform these list polls, which is nothing but like a glorified list of saying, give me a list of users that fit this criteria, right? And then on top of that, we want to rank them, right, based on the purchase likelihood of the given campaign. And we do this so many times, we realize that, hey, like this is something that every marketer would want, right? This is like a perfect tool that you rank your users based on these given criteria, and you have a scored list of who's going to buy, like perfect, right? So that's kind of how we started to really realize we have an opportunity, right? So we left LinkedIn and we found Shopify, which is such a beautiful ecosystem of partners and app developers and merchants and marketers, right?
Right.
With a really robust data API. So this is like, we're like, okay, this is it. Like we can really leverage our expertise here. And so we created a prototype in about a month. We kind of launched it with a few people from the Shopify Facebook group. And then we never looked back, right? Like our first version had like a super limited set of features, like a simple executive summary, a time series chart, and then our interpretation of RFM, and that was pretty much it. And we just never looked back.
Yeah. I love it. And, and I can just see that even the visual part of the platform has certainly changed since we last spoke. Now with the new version 2, the UI, and just the visual experience part of it, because there's nothing better than working with an application and some software that has some important visual elements to it. Like just then you feel like you want to work in the tool. So I think you were very, very intentional in the aesthetics of it and the UI.
Yeah, we actually spent a lot of time just thinking about the design and the UI and how to bring forth like a simple, a fun user experience for our customers. Right? I think the one thing that we're different from other people, because I think we keep saying that we want to build analytics compassionately and we want to make data more human. And so helping brands, helping merchants make sense of the data in an intuitive way, not just about numbers and charts, but also just being able to like take in the information, play around with it. We designed interactive pieces to some of the analysis and charts, like product journey. You have to click around, and so it's like it's a path to discovery and a path to getting to data drivenness without thinking about like the underlying sort of math and calculations. Like we think that's the future, right, of analytics, and not really requiring like a data teams, traditional data teams, so to speak, right?
Right.
And so that's just getting to that interactiveness, a little bit of gamification, with some prescriptive recommendations and playbook. I think that's the future. I think that's what we want to get to.
I love the playbooks part of it because I think, I think that's where you dip your toes in the pool, so to speak, by adding on the segments tool. And we'll talk about an offer at the end of the show today. But what's interesting, once it ingests all your data on the dashboard, see a high level, as you said, about, your active customers, your at-risk and churn based on your customer data, not just some kind of generic number of when you believe you might want to interact with the customer. It's so interesting. And then when you can look at the section and going, hey, okay, there's a bunch of people that are one-timers, but they're at risk of churning. That's interesting. I wonder how I can market to those people. And I love the fact that you've created playbooks. You can click on that segment. It tells you the size of it. You can have a peek at it. And then from there, you have some best practices and things that you can wrap your head around. Well, what are some of the ideas here? How can I market to that segment of customer? And then it gives you some ideas. Yes, it could be a sync to Facebook. It could be a sync to Google. It could be, soon an SMS or certainly an email outbound campaign based on that segment. So I think it's pretty cool that you have that functionality. So I want to pivot a bit over to, I guess, to some of the trends and things you're seeing. Because one thing I know for sure is that Segments analyzes a lot of data because you have so many Shopify brands that are connected to the platform. And I think, if you look at some of the e-commerce trends today, maybe as it compares to maybe what happened in 2020, I mean, that was the middle of the pandemic. We're still Delta variant, lots of still craziness. And, we are still kind of moving into Q4 right now. And this is like the busy holiday season. But like, do you have any predictions about BFCM 2021? And is there anything specific that you think maybe segments might be able to assist with brands today?
Yeah, absolutely. So this year is really, really interesting. Like, I mean, on one side, we kind of just wrapped with 2020, which is a crazy year in many ways. But this year, like you think like, hey, we were riding such a e-commerce was such a high, right? Like it was a booming time, and 2021 it just felt quieter. Like it just felt quieter, and we actually went to the database and we actually looked, and so in fact, what we saw is that year to date from January to September, we're actually seeing roughly on average about a decrease about 14% of total orders from last year to date, same time, right? And in fact, about a quarter of the stores that we analyzed had a dip of more than 50% in terms of orders this year versus last year. Right? That just seems like such a mind-boggling thing where it's like, wow, this is like a really big drop-off. Yeah. But then I realized, well, last year was a really big bump, right? Like between like March, April, May, a lot of people were seeing just crazy numbers in terms of like new record sales. That's when like COVID was its peak. You know, we had these like stimulus checks that were flying out. But like this year, it was just not happening, and there was a lot of what we call sort of revenge shopping in retail. Right. People were country was opening up, people were out and about. And so e-commerce felt a little more quiet this year. But when you compare that same period to 2019, you still see like a really big bump. Like it's actually a really healthy growth, like around 91% on average. And so what does that tell me is that this year, Q4, is going to be really, really important for a lot of brands, because the drop off versus last year, I think that will be the key is just like, well, how much can I make back in the next 4 months?
And then, so knowing that data then, so understanding the fact that, a lot of brands maybe are experiencing a little bit of a downturn, call it, 10 to 15%, some 20, some 50%. I could see maybe some food companies and different things where they're offering food packs and, a lot of like, basic kind of necessities, toilet paper, everything. I mean, there are a lot of brands that just, you couldn't get into retail or they were sold out and the only way you could buy it was online. And so I can appreciate that there's those sort of challenges, but let's just say on average, okay, 15% down year to date. And so how does segments work then as far as, okay, that is the reality of what's happening right now. Your tool, does it have the capacity to look at the order history, and then make some intelligent decisions? Because brands, that's all they're thinking about today. You're right. It's kind of a make or break quarter. You've probably been, that's why they call it Black Friday. You've likely been losing money and a decline potentially, leading up to Q4. So now what do we do with all of this legacy data that you've ingested into segments? Like, how are you recommending now brands can execute on what segments is revealing?
So there's a couple of things, right? So I think if you think about if 2021 will actually be more of a reversion to the norm, if you will, like it just because last year was such an anomaly, right? So last year, the Q4 only represented roughly about 37% of the total year sales, right? Where a typical year was probably more like 40 or 45%. And so I think this year we will probably see somewhere closer to like 43, 45% in terms of sales for the entire year happening in Q4. And so if that does come true, then that actually there's a lot of opportunity to be gained here, right? Just in those 3 months, especially in those 5 days between Thanksgiving to Cyber Monday. And Klaviyo actually had a really interesting data point last year, is that roughly 48% of BFCM sales actually came from a customer with a previous relationship, right? So as you are thinking about acquisition, that might be the first inkling to go to, but actually there's a lot of you can do with your existing customer base, and it's much, much more affordable to retarget them. And so this year, what we wanted to do is we will preload the segments dashboard with a few Black Friday segments, right? And we're thinking about things like, hey, all the people who have converted in Black Friday last year and have since churned, your big spenders during Black Friday, your discount shoppers, or your top spenders this year, right? Like there's a lot of segments that can be very, very targeted with the Black Friday, Cyber Monday flavor that you can directly plug and play, right? And then the strategy becomes like, okay, I have these customers now that I just need to build a highly converting campaign across all my channels, right? Like Facebook and Google and email and SMS using a multi-pronged approach with a well-timed campaigns, right? Like instead of trying to figure out who my customers are, what are my big acquisition campaigns, you definitely can focus on part of your remarketing strategy as well.
Now, what about, I don't want to bring up an elephant in the room here, but with iOS, Apple's iOS 14.5 that's released now, and the looming kind of iOS 15, and I think, one of the things that I've noticed in there, I spoke with Loris from Omnisend, and, one of the comments he made was they know that, opens are dead, meaning that most people are not opting into being tracked. It's kind of the default is you have to say yes to opt in. He had a beta copy of iOS 15 and they did all their research on it. And so they've proven the fact that, you're not going to be able to track. I mean, there are ways of looking at it. I mean, you can listen to that episode. I'll put a link in the show notes for his workarounds for email and kind of how do we overall look at return on ad spend and understand and can be assumptive about the fact that email is actually working, even though you can't track the fact that it's opened. But so I'm just curious from your side of the table, from the data side, if in fact people are not opting in to a lot of things, and so the privacy and these sort of things. So how do segments fit into that equation now if iOS 15 is going to roll soon with all these new privacy policies? So,
I mean, there's a lot of trends and speculations, right?
Yeah, true.
And so, but I think it's not 100% about being tracked, but it's also more about like what you will use the data for. And I think we will think about, as a consumer, I think I will think about when I want to share some of my data, right? And I don't think it's a blanket no for everything.
Right, fair enough.
But coming back to, like, you look at Chrome is going to, probably change your cookie policy, right? Like the iOS stuff, that's already happening with the opt-ins, right? Pretty much that rocked Facebook, right? That really literally rocked Facebook. But then Apple has their own sort of ad network, right? They're kind of slowly kind of nudging you towards using. And so I would say it's not 100% tracking is going away, but it's more about just tracking you respectfully, or like tracking and respecting the privacy policies and respecting people's data. And so it's going to, I think we're going to get to a point where people are going to start, they're sort of tying it back down, but I think they're going to open it back up towards the brands or the companies that are trying to do this thing right. And then they will be more receptive to that kind of message. But having to like Shopify, right? Just coming back to like first party data for a second here. Like, I feel like we're so fortunate to be working with Shopify, because you, like, as a merchant on Shopify, you own all the first party data that you have on your store. And that's amazing, right? That's amazing, just because that's such it's like a gold mine, right? Like understanding what your customers are doing and understand who they are and using that data to be able to retarget to them is not going to go away. And so I think that's sort of the stress or the emphasis is going to be shifting more towards the first party data. So let's talk about competitors in the space, because, this RFM, this recency frequency monetization strategy, and just, machine learning and AI and lots of different kind of recommendation engines and different things that are out there in the marketplace. Some are more personalization, kind of on page things for the known or the unknown visitor. But then there's also looking what Segments does with the first party data and then helping, just delicately nudge the marketer in the right direction and just, maybe holistically understanding all of your customers in different cohorts. And so I love what you're doing. I believe there's a few others in the space that are attempting to solve similar problems, but I know you're differentiated quite a bit. And so are you able to talk a little bit about what Segments is doing as a kind of unique MVP to the market versus maybe others doing, more Swiss Army knife of marketing strategy? And the first and foremost, right, like I think service is in sort of in our DNA. And so I think for us, it's like, we are kind of like, I sometimes joke, right? Like we are kind of like the data Sherpas, right? Like we're kind of like the data Sherpas that carrying you up the Mount Everest, right? Because I think that's really what it is. It's just like, I find it that most people have a difficult time understanding data. It's because this interface is not natural, like between data and humans. Right. And so again, just coming back to making data more human, we want to remove distractions, right? Like we try to keep pages very simple, not a ton of like data and packed with like charts and everything. Like just like one thing does, one page does one thing at a time. And you can really sit down, you can really play with the tool, and you can actually derive insights on your own without writing code, without needing sort of like a data analyst or expert next to you. And that is sort of the key, I think, to unlock more value, to be self-guided towards data.
I'd also add too that, there's many brands that use, I'm going to call them a BI tool, these business intelligence tools, and they can be quite pricey. And, they don't need to be named. It's pretty easy to figure out who they are. But the reality is a lot of times brands are spending large amounts of money to get access to these tools, but they're only using a small portion of it, or they're overwhelmed with so much power and so much enterprise features built into it that sometimes it's just, there's too many people touching the pie. They're just not getting the best value out of it. Where in your particular case, it's like, no, I'm doubling down and focusing on first party data inside Shopify in a Shopify store, and then giving them some actionable insights of how to use that data versus, when I say a Swiss Army knife, but there's lots of tools out there that can do lots of different things. And then, you end up not being a master of any of them because there's just so many things. I got one brand that's using some tool and all they do is use it just for the inventory kind of like forecasting side of it. I'm like, well, there's so much more power in this tool and you're just not using it. Like maybe there's another tool available that just can help you with inventory forecasting and seasonality. Right. So that's, I think, one of the key differentiators I see, not to mention your Facebook and Google connections now too, which I think are fantastic.
So getting back to like why people use us, right? Like I honestly feel like people come to us looking for answers, right? And they have a bunch of questions in their head, like, well, what if I do this? What if I do that? And they want to be able to see the data before they segment, right? Like, I feel like a lot of people ask us the questions, well, I have Shopify Analytics, or like I have Klaviyo. Why do I really need segments? Right. And I think a lot of times it's really about the simplicity and then the power to be able to filter every single page based on the customer set, given the attributes. I don't think anyone is actually doing that as far as I can tell. That is sort of the power. Is like we want to be able to segment and then have the analytics reflect the segment that you choose. And so that way it's going back to like more like spreadsheets analogies, but like in spreadsheets, everybody likes to use pivot tables with like these columns that you can filter and pivot on. Right. But if you feel like that's useful, then think about like if you can actually have pre-built insights and you can still filter and pivot, right? Like that's kind of what we are getting to here with segments. It's like we already figured out the useful visualizations and then the insights with the machine learning model built in. But now you can also filter. Now you can also build your own customers' IDs and then change the data based on that. Like that is in itself is really, really powerful to allow everyone to kind of become their own sort of data scientists in a way, and that they can actually figure out, well, what does my active subscribers look like? What does my loyal customers look like? How are they different? Looking at the data change and then using that to guide their marketing campaigns, their at-risk recoveries, change the timings, and so on. That I think is the true power. It's like you no longer really need a data team anymore. Segments does almost a lot of the job for you. And
I just love your pre-built segments. And I think I have an analogy I use with my merchants all the time. It's the crawl, walk, and run kind of methodology, meaning that, maybe at the beginning, ingest your data, and then let's just try one thing. Let's just crawl a bit here first. And then when you start understanding, you look at the left navigation inside the tools, those listening today, hopefully you download the tool and just have it ingest your data and take a look to see what Segments is doing. But it's so interesting that, there's ways of just executing on just a simple cohort of customer. And let's build some LTV out of this at-risk category of maybe 2 times purchaser or a 1-time purchaser, but they're at risk of churning. Probably a good one to tackle first because they've already bought from you but they haven't bought a second time. What should we do with them? You have a great playbook, execute. That's a crawl strategy, but then you can just keep going and going and going to that you're like full steam ahead using the whole power of the platform.
Exactly. Yep. That's what we set it up as.
So I'm going to get into a story now. Because I think, as entrepreneurs and marketers, I think we all love stories. I think it's the education and the inspiration around a story. I believe it can really I don't know, just motivate a lot of change in a lot of us. And so are you able to maybe share a recent journey of a Shopify or Shopify Plus brand that has implemented segments and kind of like, they didn't have it, now they have it, and kind of like what happened along the way? Or maybe it's an agency partner that, that chose to use the tool with one of their clients. Just curious if there's anything that top of mind.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I actually do a ton of demo calls still, like with all of our customers, because I just really enjoy meeting customers and talking to them and listening to their problems, right? But this one that came to mind recently, which is actually it's actually with an agency partner. So we actually work with a lot of marketing agencies.
Oh, cool.
And they use segments to improve marketing campaigns and create segments for their clients, right? And one of the partner was like, hey, like, can we chat? Because I just saw you launched a bunch of new features. It's like, I want to make sure that I can leverage it properly for my clients. So we got on the call. We had a really nice long chat. Bounced a bunch of ideas off. Talk about product journey, product relations, some of those things. And he had a lot of really just great questions, right? And we ended up talking about the product journey, and I saw that his eyes kind of lit up, right? Like he just kind of like, he was like, okay. And I could see his extension. I could almost feel like I could see his neurons firing up in his brain where he was just like, I think he was just like looking for ways to grab it, looking for ways to use it for his clients, right?
Yeah.
And he gravitated toward product journey. He was just like, wow, this is really cool, man. Like, is this actually showing me like what do people buy next, like after their first product purchase? Right. Is that what I think it is? And I was like, yeah, that's actually what it is. And he's just like, wow, like I've been looking for things like that. And I get this reaction a lot actually when I demo the product journey. It's just like people wondering why this doesn't exist. I would just say, it's like, why couldn't I just have this, right? Like, I just want to know, given this product that they bought first, what did they buy next, right? And then if I could just click around and understand the product journey, I could learn so much about my customers. And so that's actually I feel like we spent so much time just talking about the product journey and product relations and why it matters. And he was just like, okay, well, can we do that? Do you mean you want to do a product ticket campaign, or do I do a post-purchase flow? And so we started bouncing ideas, and it just kind of flowed from there.
Yeah, I love it. And nice thing too, and thanks for sharing that. But what's interesting too about the whole agency world is that I can see there being an opportunity for segments. So for those agency partners that are listening today, I mean, what a great value add, like this partner, but what a great value add to be able to, as part of your RFP, as part of your, maybe onboarding potential new Shopify brands from a marketing strategy perspective. Imagine being able to share the results and things that you have found and some recommendations that you're recommending thanks to segments. I think that could have a lot of power in a proposal, on a retainer customer that you may want to close, that you could help with their marketing strategy to say, no, we've imported your first party data. We're going to understand it completely, both the product journey and the RFM modeling of just overall the customer and where they are from an active, an at risk or churned, loyal versus kind of like no purchases. I think knowing that information and sharing as an agency partner, sharing that with a potential prospect, I think is just worth its weight in gold, and definitely differentiates yourself to other agency partners that you're trying to get the business from. So
yeah, we love marketing agency partners. Like we have a couple of agency partners that is like they're using our platform so effectively for their stores and for their clients, right? And then that it actually alleviates a lot of the pain in-house, right? Like a lot of the reporting that they have to do all the time is very manual, right? And it's very repetitive. But a lot of that goes away with segments because you can actually just be like, oh, you want this segment for this time range? Done, right? Like I just have to click a few buttons and then I can just get data. That just saves them like hours and hours of work, especially when they have these strategic calls or like monthly calls with their customers, as well as like building segments. I would say it's very easy and very friendly to be able to just build segments and sync it to platforms. And for this one agency partner, he was really happy, right? He was just like, wow, like we got to do this more. And it was kind of funny because he was saying like, hey, are you fundraising? I was like, well, what? Like, well, why? And he's like, he's like, well, hey, just let me know, right? Because I was like, maybe I want to put some money in. And I was like, okay, I see what you're saying. I was like, yeah, right. Like, it's like, okay, so you want to give me more money? Okay, but
yeah, for sure.
I mean, but it's just like really humbling, right? Like I think for me, the feeling for me was just like, oh wow, like it's really humbling to know that they believe in our product, they believe in our vision so much that he would consider doing like, like just wanting to be part of the story, right? Wanting to be part of the other side as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like it gives me so much motivation to just continue to doing the right things.
I love that. You know what's great too? Because I have a lot of brands that are connected to segments, even part of my monthly calls, part of the value prop of being on Shopify Plus is sometimes you get access to a merchant success manager. And I'm that person. There's a couple hundred of us. But what's interesting is like part of my monthly strategic calls, because I'm a trusted advisor for them and I like to help them improve efficiencies or, profitably grow revenue or, build lifetime loyalty, these sorts of things. And I always, quite often, I actually go into segments with that particular brand, and I take screenshots out of things that I've noticed. Some of your default things, like the dashboard for sure, but then a couple other filters of the product journey. I show a few things and some visualizations you have, and it just opens up some really interesting dialogue. So I could see how it can help an agency partner. I'm looking at from the Shopify side saying, hey, I want to offer value to the brands that I manage. And like, have you looked at this yet? Do you even know this is even available? No, I don't. And then all of a sudden, like, okay, we're going to use this tool now.
Exactly. Yeah. It's all about helping the merchants, right? Like uncovering the things that are already there in the store. Like that's what it's all about.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about the future for segments, because obviously, the last time we chatted, I don't know, 8-9 months ago, I think things have pivoted along. We launched version 2 of the UI now. I believe there's some connections now to Google. There's lots of stuff going on. So just would love to hear kind of where the future's headed, partner alignment, and just kind of what 21 is going to look like for the segments platform.
Yeah, I think more and more, like we realize just like how important it is to just be connected with the ecosystem, with the Shopify ecosystem, right? With our partners, with our different app developers, because collectively we are all bringing in more value to the brand and to each other. The digital customer journey is so complex these days, right? Like they go from the web to email, to SMS, to push, to help desks, to loyalty programs and subscription programs. And so you kind of have to be a connective tissue that moves together, right? To be able to target all of them sort of simultaneously or like contextualized. So for us, we kind of see ourselves being like a central intelligence hub, if you will. Like we want to be kind of connected to the different marketing platforms, to the different apps, so we can not only sync the segments that you have created to all of your channels, but also start ingesting and start intake some of those feedback, right? Like analytics, ROI, to be able to contextually understand how the customer's journeying through the different channel, right? And I think eventually that becomes sort of like a navigation, right? It's almost like being able to help you guide through what channels, when, and what's more effective. Kind of like a navigation tool on like a Google Maps, right? I think that's something that's going to be super powerful. And it's a vision that I'm really, really excited about.
Beautiful. Well, I'll be watching from the sidelines, my friend. Don't worry. So we are nearing the end of the show for today, and I just once again thank you for coming on. But just any final thoughts, insights, any takeaways that you would like to leave with our listeners today?
So I think just coming back to like just first party data just once more, because I think that is something that people can't take away from you, right? And so understanding what your customers are already doing in your store is like a well that keeps on giving, right? It's just like you could, there's so much more by peeling the onion one layer at a time, like starting with the timing of the purchase cycles, and then looking at what do they buy next, and optimizing different purchase flows based on the product lines, the SKU lines. Those are things that we have seen work time and time again with our customers. And so if that's not something that you have tried or have started to look at yet, I definitely invite you to start taking a look, especially now that a lot of the Facebook tracking sort of is kind of wonky. You can build more targeted audiences and retargeting audiences using the first party data, by segmenting first through segment and then syncing them back to Facebook and Google, right? Whereas before you kind of rely on Facebook to tell you what people are doing on their pixels, right, from the tracking codes, and then doing the filters that way. But you have never taken sort of a proactive approach by segmenting your customers first and then pushing it back and teaching Facebook who you want to target. And that table has flipped, right? Like with segments, you can do it. And so I think that's something that not a lot of people have thought about, but it's definitely something that's worth experimenting.
So how can people learn more about segments? Where can they go? And the Shopify app?
Yeah, so they can find us on Trestle.co. That's our website. And we have our app. It's called Segments on Shopify App Store. So if you search for segments, segment plus an S, you will most likely find us. And I think, Steve, you could be putting the links to it, right?
Yeah, definitely. So it's Trestle is spelled Tresl.co. Yeah, I'll put this in the show notes. So Trestle.co is kind of the parent company, and one of their app is this segment solution, which we're chatting about today, and highly, highly, highly personally recommend it. So it is a fantastic tool. I also understand that you would like to, I guess, offer a little extra bonus for those that are listening today that may want to take the platform for a spin and see what the tool can reveal for their data.
Yes, for sure. Yes. So for all the listeners of the E-commerce Fastlane podcast today, we'll be excited to offer an extended 30-day free trial of Segments. And if you install now, right, so now until Black Friday, we will be preloading your store with Black Friday, Cyber Monday Segments. We're going to launch this sometime in October, November timeframe. Yep. So you'll be able to leverage that at no cost.
Perfect. That's fantastic. So it'll be ecommercefastlane.com/segments. So that's going to redirect to this offer, because I think it's a 14-day free trial, I think, in the App Store. But there'll be a landing page where you can take John and his team up on that offer to get access to Segments. It really is a great tool. And if you're like I said, if you're not heavily involved with understanding your first party data, if you're a little bit concerned about what's happening with these privacy policies and people not opting in, and iOS updates, and the cookieless kind of world that's happening with Chrome, these are all interesting conversations, but there are workarounds, and the workarounds are to understand the data that's already inside Shopify, but just now being able to action it. And I think that's one of the power of the Segments platform, is that, like you said, putting it into cohorts, into these segments of customers, and then knowing how to reach out to them. And like you said, training Facebook and Google about the fact that these are the kind of customers that I want, or this is a campaign that I want to run to, win them back. And so it's great that we're able to organize that, and then understanding product journeys. I think this is it's a fantastic tool. And thanks again for recording so late at night. Thank you for once again sharing your knowledge and your vision, and really just giving back to the Shopify ecosystem.
Of course. Yeah, no, I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Loved it.
Have yourself a great evening.
Thank you, Steve.
Care. Now, this episode was brought to you by Attentive, a personalized text message solution trusted by innovative brands like CB2, Coach, and thousands of Shopify brands. Now, as I mentioned, on average, Attentive customers see a 25x ROI, and over 18% of their online revenue is driven by SMS. Now, are you ready for SMS to become one of your top revenue channels? You can learn more how to get started and get your free trial by requesting a demo at attentivemobile.com. Well, that's it for today's episode. I'd like to thank you, a loyal listener of E-commerce Fastlane. It's my hope that this podcast is offering you a ton of value through growth strategies, tactics, and exclusive insider tips on the best Shopify apps and marketing platforms, all with my personal goal to help you build, launch, grow, and scale with Shopify. Thanks for investing some time today and listening to the show. I'm so proud and excited that you have a growth mindset and are a constant learner. I truly appreciate you and your entrepreneurial journey. Enjoy the rest of the week and keep thriving with Shopify.